Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. We're glad to see you all with us this morning. Brian Searles, and look at that. Helen Really, my God. Look at this. Good group here this morning. This is an interesting subject this morning. This is the, again, the Senate Transportation Committee. We're continue our discussion on the Burlington International Airport governance. And it's a subject that we took up a couple of weeks ago with the help of Senator Chittenden, and just get an update on the airport. We know it's a Burlington operated airport, but we've always been interested in talking about a regional airport. So I know you folks have some background knowledge about this subject, so thank you for joining us. So who would like to lead off this morning? I have Megan Emery, the first on the list here.
Yes.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Senator Mazza. I'd be happy to start out.
Sure.
And yes, I am responding to Jeannie. I am willing to share the document I submitted this morning. Can I do that through the Zoom? I'll try. Let me just, hold on.
If anybody can tell us some secrets about Senator Chittenden, it would be helpful. You know?
Yeah. Well, and you're gonna find out, first of all, that he has better eyesight than I do, because I had saved the document with a very large font so I could read it without my eyeglasses. So let me just put you the way I have it, and that will just be the way it is. Okay.
Want us to come back to you, Councilor Emery?
That would be good. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Who would see? Helen, Chair of the South Orange City Council.
I'm happy.
How are you?
Well, a warm hello. It's nice to see some former friends. I guess they're still my friends.
We go back
and I thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Does that mean we're no longer friends? You're just former?
No, I said I hope we're still friends. Colleagues, former colleagues. Always a friend, Jane.
How is it? How are you with Senator Chittenden, first of all? You know, because we're he's trying to keep us in line here, so I don't.
And it's working. I'm the worst.
Well, that's great. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide my perspectives on the need for or support for an independent study on the pros and cons of regionalization, and specifically how I believe this might positively affect a commission and its role in governance. Let me first say I'm at the end of a horrendous cold, and I do get little coughing jags, so I apologize ahead of time.
All right.
A little background. I'm a 10-year veteran of the South Burlington City Council, which I now chair, and I have for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I guess. And I'm a member of the Airport Commission representing South Burlington, and I've been on that. I was appointed officially in April 2018 after the death of Pat Nowak. I'm speaking today specifically of my experience as a commissioner, and I want to make it very clear, I'm not representing the Airport Commission officially in any way, just a perspective as a member. To refresh your memory, perhaps, there's 5 members. 4 of them are mayoral appointees, and 1 represents South Burlington and is selected by the South Burlington City Council. Winooski's rep is pending, coupled with an additional Burlington appointee to, if that passes, the commission would then have 7 members, 5 of whom represent and are appointed by the mayor, and 2 by virtue of where they live, Winooski and South Burlington. As currently constituted, we're purely advisory without any authority. We meet monthly, we review financials, we receive project updates, we agree to recommend proposals for FAA funding for construction projects. We review a proposed annual budget. We receive informational presentations about the airport and are provided an annual evaluation of the airport director. So all our actions are voted and serve as advice solely to the Burlington City Finance Committee, who then advances or not proposals for full city council approval. One typically important role for the commission is evaluation of the director. In fact, this is typically one of the most important things that any commission or oversight board of directors does. And let me expand on that evaluation process. I was rather startled the first time during one meeting early on, and I was handed an evaluation level, carefully written, that had been produced by the staff, the leadership staff, what the former director called his team. And we were supposed to read it and accept it, having had no input. And when and so I was taken back, and I don't even think I voted for the first one. I was just flabbergasted. When the administration was queried about the process, because I asked them questions, and importantly, I wanted to know if there were any benchmarks for evaluation identified by the mayor or the Burlington City Council or even the commission prior to my joining to use for evaluation. And the response was no. This is the mayoral appointee, and he reviews them. When the committee asked for a job description, again, we were handed one, and we worked on one and added a few items, most notably that one of the important concepts in our mind was to promote and develop strong and good relationships with those communities affected by the airport. But we never received any response to our additions to that evaluation. So very clearly, the director is a mayoral appointee. I suspect he or she would get approval by the full council, but I'm not sure. So it appeared to me that our evaluation is perfunctory at best. And this is really deeply concerning to me. This is a position that is extremely important to the counties and the state's economy and economic vitality. And to have no clear or shared process for that evaluation didn't sit particularly well with me. Prior to my tenure on the commission, a number of years ago, I mean, it was probably 20 years ago, the commission was more autonomous. In Burlington, you had the airport commission that really had some heft, and you had a police commission that had some heft and made some real decisions. I believe it was under the Peter Clovell reign that he reorganized the commission system in the city of Burlington, excuse me, and the oversight for the airport was given to the commission, but it was an advisory commission. I feel that that's really inappropriate. I've had issues certainly with past directors. Generally speaking, I think the airport is in a great spot, and economically it is doing very well with the ARPA money. It helped us pay our bills and not lay people off. And we've worked very hard to add additional carriers and strengthen the airport. And I think if you've gone through it, visually it's very beautiful. I appreciate some of the very positive or informative walls along one of the upper corridors that really talk about the opiate issues in Vermont and how we're dealing with mental health. So to its credit, I think it's acted as an important and helpful partner for some of the state issues that plague us all. But I feel that its importance warrants more consideration and real conversation about its impact, both pro and con, of the region. And a different kind of governance may very well improve that and make us even stronger. It's a little hard to believe that one of the most important economic engines, if you will, of Northern Vermont and in part the rest of the state is a mayoral appointee and a commission that is largely the appointments of a single person. When I look at the members on the commission, I mean, I'm only there virtue as a member of South Burlington. The other members, you know, when I first went on, we had the founder of a beer company. We have now a leader, I guess, you know, the athletic director of UVM. We have another business person from Burlington, and we just lost one of the members who was a former legislator and a former city council. None of us, including myself, have any background or expertise in running an airport. And not that I believe that a commission should essentially run the airport, but I think having greater knowledge of more of the aspects of the airport would be helpful. I think there's a real disconnect between all of the businesses that are airport related and the commission in terms of working together and understanding how they work together or not to make a really strong airport. So I don't know what an outcome of a study might be, but I would be very interested in having an independent study done by potentially the state in charge of selecting those individuals and reviewing what might happen or what might be a better fit for the state of Vermont. So that's my spiel. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Helen. You covered it very, very well. It's something I thought about for years and always wondered about the airport, seeing it's pretty much run by one person, even though it's such a big asset for the whole state. And I'm glad that Senator Chittenden joined us with some more expertise because of South Burlington, which is great. And over the years, I've heard about all these issues that it's run by basically one person. It's always concerned me that it should be broader than that, but I don't know a lot of details. You've explained it well. You covered it very well because they could appoint me tomorrow morning as manager of the airport. And what expertise do I have? I would think that that's just one part of the puzzle that has to come together. So any questions for Helen before we move on? Okay, yes, Senator Chittenden, anything?
Thank you, Chair. I think you really articulated some of the history too, and highlighting that in the past, the Airport Commission has had a stronger role back a long time ago, and that might just be an outcome of this as well. So we don't know what this study committee could produce, but small changes to address some of the concerns you've raised, I think will only strengthen the next 10 to 20 years of the airport. So thank you so much for that testimony.
You're very welcome.
Okay, we want to go back to Megan. Is that you're okay? Good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go right
thank
ahead.
you. Hopefully Ms. Lowell's been able to forward to you my written testimony. I think it's always helpful to have it before your eyes. And I'm very willing to share all of the notes that I took during the meetings that I am just going to give you a brief summary of.
Chair, Vice Chair of the Council, is that correct, Megan?
I am the vice chair of the city council, and I appear only as one member of that council. Senator Chittenden invited me to share some of what I learned over the past 5 months, and what I would characterize as a crisis of confidence in airport management at BTV. And just as some background, I've served on the city council for 12 years. I have contacts and friends who work at the airport, and I've lived in the Chamberlain neighborhood, or what is called the airport neighborhood, for 20 years. So I can draw on my deep experience as I make my remarks to you today. So earlier in March, I was approached by a member of the general aviation community, and that means the private aviation community at the Burlington International Airport. Doug Smith is a resident of South Burlington. He's a retired commercial pilot for Delta Airlines and the founder of the Vermont Flight Academy. He's also a friend. And as a constituent of mine, he reached out to me, one of his city councilors, to invite me to a tour of the Flight Academy, Vermont Tech, the Burlington Tech Center, and Aerodyne. We spent 3.5 hours together speaking with many of our state's top aviation leaders and educators, and I learned how integral these educational and service centers are to the airport. VFA, Vermont Tech, and BTC offer accredited programs that lead to a terminal high school degree, associate's degree, all the way up to a Bachelor of Science degree. The roughly 60 students enrolled at VFA can earn any of nearly 10 different pilot's license in 2/3 of the time compared to other flight schools nationwide. They have 1,000 flight hours to complete compared to 1,500 flight hours at other academies. So our academy is distinctive because it is a Part 141 FAA accredited academy, and 100% of the graduates, including men and women, find positions as commercial pilots or mechanics. 95% of them are pilots. Over the past weeks, I also met with team members at Beta, the CEO of Heritage Aviation, and a manager at Pratt & Whitney. And because of the conditions of our airfield, I learned, including our seasons and the Green Mountains, and the fact that this is an international airport with a control tower, the flight training schools at our airport are ideally placed for producing pilots. Because the Burlington area, the lake, and surrounding mountain resorts are a draw for tourists, the businesses that support airport operations, like Heritage, like Pratt & Whitney, are strategically placed to make us even more attractive to owners of private aircraft. This campus, located in the general aviation area of the airport, or what is called the Valley, is without a doubt, given the high demand for pilots and mechanics today, one of the most important tech employment centers in the state, and it sets Vermont apart. Vermont Flight Academy is now partnering with Beta Technologies to expand their pilot training program and support the development of green aviation in a general aviation center. And I have no doubt that this partnership here at our international airport will be long-lasting and a boon to the state of Vermont for decades to come. We have a world-class operation that is blossoming right before our eyes here in South Burlington, Vermont. And yet, going back to that initial outreach a few weeks ago, I'm here to tell you that not everyone in this community is thriving like they should be. The Burlington Tech Center and Aerodyne are housed in rusting, decrepit hangars. There are not enough hangars for aircraft used by the Academy and Tech Center, and their exposure to snow and ice weathers aircraft, shortening their lives. There is competition for what is perceived to be not enough land for expansion and lack of trust between all members of the general aviation community. Having spoken with more than a dozen people in the general aviation valley, here are some of the pressing needs that indicate to me a clear need for an independent study on airport governance. The Burlington Tech Center just received a $10 million federal grant to build a new school, combining both the high school and the Vermont Tech programs, and they do not have a clear idea of where they can site a new building. I can see from the maps of airport land where they can go, but it will take coordination with other tenants, and this coordination is lacking. There is a desperate need for hangar space for aircraft, and the 4 rusting, though solid, post-World War II Cold War era hangars need to be refurbished. This is not a new problem. This has been the case for years and has not been dealt with. There is a wariness between tenants, exacerbated by a lack of trust in the airport governance structure. Many members of the general aviation community expressed to me their frustration over the composition of the Advisory Airport Commission, which they believe should not be composed solely of friends of the mayors, but rather some people who know something about aviation, including pilots and mechanics. The biggest takeaway from my meetings, and it was not unanimous, but it was by far representative of the majority, is that the policymaking and planning processes at the airport are not transparent, they lack vision, and they do not include the airport community members in a coherent communication structure. Just one illustrative example. Some of the tenants are called regularly into meetings with the airport director, and others do not even know that meetings are being held. Burlington's management of the airport had resurfaced as a topic of concern this past December when a petition was submitted by members of the general aviation community at the airport to the Burlington City Council, demanding that their needs be considered in planning processes. I've named a few of their concerns, and here are a few more. There needs to be rational, coordinated discussion of 1, which tenants need to have access to the runway? 2, which tenants require access to one of the 2 aprons in the valley used for engine run-ups? 3, where businesses can expand? And 4, where parking, commercial buildings, and other amenities should go. The current headlines in the news, I would say, fall back on airport governance, not just on our development review board. I do not believe that past airport studies commissioned by Burlington have been comprehensive enough, nor inclusive of all the stakeholders that make Burlington International Airport the most important economic engine of the state. This is a precious asset that is an enterprise fund of the city of Burlington. And another point that contradicts Mayor Weinberger's assertion that Burlington taxpayers have alone invested in the Burlington International Airport. This enterprise fund, like our water or wastewater funds, are self-contained with expenses paid from the fees raised, not property tax. The fiscal year 22 Burlington International Airport Enterprise Fund budget shows the revenues are grants, fees, investments, charges for service, use of fund balance, and so on and so forth. The only interfund transfers are on the expense side and show revenues from the airport going out to the city of Burlington. And if there is required debt service, why should the Burlington taxpayers alone be on the hook for backing debt that clearly benefits users from across the state and region? A regional governance model would require another form of debt security. These questions require study, independent study, and I call on your committee to take this bill to the full Senate and argue its merits. We have a world-class airport that needs a world-class management structure. And now it's truly in your hands. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I'm willing to take questions.
Councilor Emery, on that point you just raised, it's come up a couple of times questioning what financial transfers there are. Do you happen to know how much money in FY22 was transferred from the Airport Enterprise Fund to the city of Burlington to pay for portions of the mayor's salary and other shared services like HR and parking management?
You know what? I'm going to go back and take a look at it because I have been grading papers. I'm a professor by by trade.
I'd love it via email afterwards. Don't want to use everybody.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that, Tom.
Thanks.
Tom, can I just weigh in? I don't know what it is up to date, but one of the first things I inquired as a commissioner was I was curious what that transfer of funds were. And I got a ballpark figure from the finance gal. And so this was 5 or 6 years ago. Approximately $490, close to $500,000 was paid to the city of Burlington for services rendered, like police and a portion of the legal costs and a portion of the mayor's salary and sort of that indirect that you have at a university.
So for all those watching on this issue, I just want to make it perfectly clear that this committee has raised a couple of times that nobody's trying to take that away from Burlington. And I could see that we're going to add language in there to recognize the city of Burlington's investment in this land 100 years ago and the good stewardship they've had over the years. If anything, that $500,000 offset could be expanded and otherwise converted into a lease payment if a regional governance model went forward. The previous director, Gene Richards, said such a model would actually make a lot more fiscal sense for the city of Burlington. They would get that $500,000 without strings attached. They could then instead invest that amount into Memorial Auditorium or otherwise. But Councilor Emery, that was phenomenal testimony. I really appreciate it. And I think an independent study will help identify all the pros and cons for the whole region and the state, including Burlington, for other governance structures. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Just a clarification on that, Senator Jim, you still have to have law enforcement and protection. So your comment, I would assume that $500,000 wouldn't all be free to be used, or you would have to make other arrangements for law enforcement.
Or if you wanted to, yes, absolutely. Or if you just wanted to contract services out, no matter what, then the city could still be assured, depending on how you were to structure that, the city was to be sure that they are not going to go backwards in the money part of it, no matter what decisions would be made to better serve the airport. So if it was decided that they should contract services out, well, you want to make assurances that the money's safe. The monies that were there would be safe.
Now, my only point is that you'd still have to have law enforcement. So some of that transfer was for a service, regardless of how it's provided. That was all. Unless
Next on my list is James Duncan, Deputy Mayor of Winooski. Good morning.
Morning, Senators. My name is Jim Duncan. I'm the Deputy Mayor of Winooski. I've been on the City Council here for 3 years, and I'm a homeowner under the flight path for 9 years. I'm here in the mayor's stead as she is currently away and sends her regrets for not being able to attend today. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak on the proposed study of governance models for the Burlington International Airport. As you likely know, Winooski is a small city of 7,000. We're directly adjacent to the airport, and nearly all residents are affected by its operations, from changes in use to overall volume. 40% of our households are inside the expanded 65 day-night average sound level contours, where housing is generally considered an incompatible use. But as of now, we have limited opportunities to weigh in on operations at the airport, including decisions about how operations might be changed or expanded in the future. The past few years have brought increased collaboration and opportunities to engage on airport issues for our community, and we're thankful for our current and growing partnership with Burlington and other communities on issues, including the upcoming addition of a Winooski representative on the Airport Commission. This has been most welcome, and we look forward to continuing to grow these partnerships a little bit more. However, I continue to hear regularly from residents that want to see Winooski and other affected communities have more input on decision-making at the airport and secure a better seat at the table and advocate for our residents. Excuse me. City residents and past city councils have repeatedly passed resolutions and ballot measures providing opinion on the decisions being made at the airport. But it has pained me as a councilor to explain to residents that these actions, while valuable for several reasons, have no outlet to actually directly impact the governance of the airport. And I think a study such as the one proposed here could demonstrate a way to address that gap and potentially close it. While I don't have the answer to what a different governance model could be, I do suspect that there's more that we can do to share this decision-making with those affected. As I understand it, the work proposed in this bill offers a path to envision what a new model might look like and evaluate several known options, as well as providing latitude to investigate other models that could arise during the course of the study, and exploring these questions in today's operational and planning context for the airport seems like an effort worthy of support. I do hope that the results of this study will be usable and actionable, and that the study committee can provide pathways for implementation as part of its recommendations at the end of the work, because I think we need to provide information to my constituents on, at the end of this study, how can we proceed? Where can we go from here? I think the representatives from the City Council in South Burlington have covered a lot of the specifics really well, so I'll keep my comments brief. I think Winooski could benefit from this. I think the residents in Winooski would benefit from this, from an exploration at least of how governance could be shifted at the airport and solve some of the issues we have around access to decision-making and a role and a seat at the table. So thank you for the opportunity to speak about this matter. If there are specific questions about Winooski's experience, I'm happy to answer those.
Deputy Duncan, I just appreciate you being here. And Christine Lott, if we would like to hear from the Winooski mayor, she would love to come in next week if the committee has interest. But this was excellent testimony. I appreciate you finding the time, sir.
Great, thank you.
Very good, very good, very good comments. Okay, next we have Charlie Baker, I believe, Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Happy to see you all this morning. I am offering comments or just participating in the discussion may be more appropriate way to phrase it. Really just as myself, the Regional Planning Commission Board has not taken a position, nor have we been asked to take a position on this issue. And I should also disclose, I was a member, or I'm sorry, a resident of South Burlington. I'm now a resident of Burlington, just full disclosure. So I think there's certainly been some conversations and issues over time. I kind of offer these comments as kind of my personal professional experiences. We've had a good working relationship with the airport and of course with our municipalities. All of those entities have seats on our board. The airports has a non-voting seat on the Regional Planning Commission board, as opposed to the municipalities, of course, that have voting seats. And there has been conversation about this, about the relationships and about issues over the last number of years, some of which I've been able to work more closely with the airport on, and others which I've just kind of witnessed from the side. And I know the airport kind of dug into some of this relationship issue a few years ago, and I'm glad to see them giving some thought to adding Winooski to the commission. I think there is something to address there, of just kind of how decisions get made and the role of the neighboring municipalities in those decisions. I think I saw a few times decisions that really kind of happened through the city that the neighboring municipalities or the host municipality heard about after the fact. And I hope some of that was corrected. That goes back a number of years ago. But so there is some work to do here, I believe. And I did read the mayor's testimony that was provided yesterday. I also think the city has, by and large, done a decent job of managing the airport and correcting issues, certainly from when Mayor Weinberger was on the commission before he became mayor. And sorry, I hope that didn't come out wrong. but I do think the mayor has done a lot of work to address issues that were evident when he was there. And as he expressed it, one of the reasons he ran for mayor. So that's kind of my just overview of the situation. And then more specifically on the language that's in front of you now. I did review it. There's a seat for the Regional Planning Commission to appoint another representative of other municipalities beyond those that you specifically named. That seems like a very decent idea. Certainly happy to support that as staff to the commission. And I did, as I read it, I had two other thoughts, and I would be happy to participate in that effort also, if you think it would be helpful, maybe even as just a non-voting member of that of the committee overseeing the consultant work led by VTrans. And I also wondered about the airport director having maybe a non-voting seat, just so that there's clearly a seat at the table for those. Mine is clearly more of a staff role, supporting our region and our municipalities. And the same thing for the airport director. I think obviously more in a staff role, but I do think there's at least some professional expertise that would be helpful to the committee if it was clearly at the table. So those are really my only two constructive suggestions I have for you this morning. But happy to take any questions or address the issues.
I don't think there's any questions. I appreciate the comments and every little bit is helping this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, last but not least is our friend Brian Searles, who's not a stranger to this place. Served many times in this committee, right, Brian?
I have been in that committee many times, Chairman Mazza. And let me start by saying, since it was mentioned earlier, that if you do decide to apply to become director of the airport, I would be fully supportive of that.
Well, I've been up in the air a couple of times here at the airport, but that's about it. Thanks, Brian. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. I know we talked a while ago and we're trying to get all the information we can get. Certainly this is a subject that's been around for some time, and I'm glad we're at least discussing it, and I hope we can come to some conclusion pretty soon about how this is going to work in the future, because it has been on my mind and many others for a long time, and it is a terribly important asset to the whole state, and we want to make sure it has good representation. So go right ahead, Brian. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chairman Mazza and Senators. Senator Kitchell, it's been a long time. Good to see you.
She still holds all the money, Brian.
I know.
I have to be really nice to her. Yeah. She has as well.
Well, you should. So let me skip through some some remarks to start with, and then take questions as needed. And I'll start out just by telling you my personal history in terms of interaction with the airport. It really started quite some time ago in the late 60s when I joined the police department in South Burlington and responded to the airport any number of times for complaints and calls for service and so on. I also worked the other side of the field for 9 years as a member of the Air National Guard. I served on an air service task force my first time around as secretary in the Dean administration that led to JetBlue service back in the 90s. And I was director of aviation for 5.5 years, and then back to VTrans until my retirement at the end of 2014. So I've had a fair amount of interaction with the airport and participation in the process. I'm not sure how much history to go into, so I'm going to make this one really short. But I think it's important to understand how the airport began 102 years ago. It really was an initiative of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, the forerunner to the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce. And because aviation was really growing, they decided that we ought to explore that idea. And with financing from several partners, including the University of Vermont, they bought the first plot of land, the former Tierney Farm in South Burlington. First plane landed there in August of 1920. So I'll start. You probably are fully aware of the military involvement, which actually started in 1928 and continues to this day with the Air National Guard. My position on this basically is that the Burlington International Airport is an extremely important regional and state resource, and the governance should reflect that, and that it currently does not. And simply stated, that's my position. And I don't say this as a criticism of the city of Burlington by any means. In the first 30 years of the airport's development, it did not operate on its own revenues, and the city of Burlington administered and helped that airport develop. I think, as a previous speaker said, the city has done a reasonably good job of stewardship at the airport. But I would add that it does depend a great deal on the elections in one community, and that the administration of the airport has been uneven depending on who's mayor. The issue before you isn't new. There's been tension over airport operations for decades. There's bound to be. When I worked in South Burlington, those noise complaints weren't heard by people in Burlington. And it wasn't just jet noise. And we're talking about, you know, the work environment at the airport is alive all night long, and there's certain things going on in the airfield that do have an effect. So any resource as important as this is going to have impacts, and a lot of these impacts are positive. I'll just mention a few. Obviously, the transportation impacts are positive. You know, 50,000 passengers boarded in 1950. It was up to 1.5 million by 2009. There's been a lot of issues since, ups and downs, and the pandemic notwithstanding, and now the airport's coming back strong again as a transportation hub. That is part of the overall economic impact, and it's the one everybody thinks of the most. So the catchment area for this airport, in other words, where it draws its passengers from, is huge. It's much, if not most, of the state of Vermont, parts of New York, parts of New Hampshire, Quebec. And according to the industry experts, for every 1 million passengers at an airport, about 1,000 jobs are created. So, and that's just related to the passenger traffic. Obviously, there's more at play than that. I agree, and I'm happy that Councillor Emery talked about the other piece of the airport, because that's often overlooked. The industry and education component on the airfield is extremely important, and Beta is the best example of that currently and is getting a lot of discussion. Overall, it's estimated that the airport is responsible directly or indirectly for about 5,000 jobs, and which leads us to the military, because there have been consistently over 1,000 members of the Air National Guard who are there either on a full-time or part-time basis across the field. And you've probably already heard that the Guard does provide valuable services to the airport in terms of fire and rescue. But with those positive impacts come some negatives. Traffic, for instance. Who realizes the negative impacts of traffic? Well, South Burlington does, Williston does, Interstate 89, the interchanges, which you talk about a lot, are certainly part of that. Noise, you've heard a lot about that. There are night flights, there's airport commerce, and then there's the whole F-35 issue. There are environmental issues that have impacts generally, and I think that the airport has done a good job of mitigation in terms of those impacts, but air quality, water quality, all affected by activity at the airport. And one that I think is now kind of in the spotlight with Beta is expansion. Even though it's gone from originally 72 acres to more than 900 acres, there's not a lot of room for expansion there. And it's really got to be well planned. How do you deal with these positive and negative impacts so that everybody's voice is heard? I think is the issue. Getting back to the effects on the interstate, I want to go back to something we've discussed, Mr. Chairman, in this committee many times, and that's the exit at Heinsberg Road, exit 12B, which when I was there, put me in kind of a difficult situation because the airport supported that. We saw that as as the airport exit of the future. There's so much pressure on exits 12 and 14 that it would relieve that. Made perfect sense. But the city of Burlington at that time was not excited about that possibility. So, it's kind of straddling the line there. So what do you do about it? Well, I think this study makes sense. And I think it's important to understand that studies have been done before. But usually they've been done by groups that had an idea where they wanted the study to go, including one that I done as a result of a group I put together, and I think Brad Worthen told you about that. Not that they weren't valuable, but I think if you pull all of those together and recognize the fact that there might be some, not complete bias, but some bias in terms of the outcome, and start from there and move on a path that doesn't include that bias, you'll be in good shape. So what are the kinds of outcomes you might get from such a study? Well, certainly the status quo in any study is something that is a possible outcome. You know, about half of the airports in this country are run by local government, either city or county. County doesn't work in Vermont, as you well know. I think the problem here is that the resolution of conflict under the current system is not working, largely because the current airport commission, as you heard in previous testimony, doesn't have any authority. So maybe a status quo plus might be another outcome. It might involve restoring the authority of the airport commission, along with some of the moves on more inclusive membership that you've heard about. A study might also include the possibility of privatization, which I can tell you hasn't worked in most places that have considered it. The fact is that the airports are a risky business. It's a business that provides a product over which it has no control. You know, we realized that in 2009 when we, after about 15 months of experience with a new airline, that airline was bought out by a larger airline that didn't serve Burlington, and it really affected the bottom line. Those are the kinds of things that lead me to talk about a possible authority, because what it showed me was you really need flexibility when something like that happens. Now you got to be able to move, you've got to be able to make adjustments very quickly at a much faster pace than a typical municipal or county government, for instance, might be able to provide. The transition from the current governance to an authority is a difficult, complicated process that hopefully a study would let you examine. But it's been done. It's been done in any number of places successfully, so you wouldn't be inventing the wheel here or reinventing the wheel. Another possibility that should be on the table for any study is for the airport to be run by the state of Vermont. We're a small state. VTrans does have an aviation component and does run some airports. And I say this not because it's a real possibility, but it certainly should be on the table. And it should also affect your decisions about who might administer or pay for this study, since if that is on the table, you wouldn't want the state to be running the study. So think about that. Let me conclude by saying that this is a major undertaking. You shouldn't underestimate the work that's involved here. But I think it needs to be done. And the first question that you should ask is why? Why are we doing that? And the response that you'll likely get is that the airport as an enterprise is successful, and I agree with that. But that's not the only issue. The bottom line isn't the only issue in terms of the airport. The impacts, positively, negatively, are so much wider than just how the airport's doing in terms of its bottom line. that would be my opinion on the question why. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would happily take any questions you might have.
I feel like I'm hogging all the airtime this morning, but Mr. Searles, your reputation far exceeds you, and it's an honor to have you in committee, and I greatly appreciate all the gravitas that all of your testimony just carried. In your list of options, I wonder if I have status quo, privatization, regional authority, and then state of Vermont ownership. I wonder what your reaction is to what I would also argue as another option that I think this committee should at least consider, which is just a reinstated strong airport commission. I would characterize from the testimony today and my firsthand experience, the current airport commission is a weak commission. It's advisory, and it hasn't always been that way. But do you have any thoughts or reactions to that as a fifth option to evaluate by this body?
Is that status quo plus?
Status quo plus.
Is that what he,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's what he meant.
Yes, yes, that is exactly what I meant. Yeah, so that would be, kind of framing or putting the airport commission in the spotlight and doing what needs to be done to satisfy all of the impacted communities that they're well represented.
Yes, very good. Any other questions?
I have a question. In terms of any study, would have to examine what we have for legal considerations. I don't know what they are, but it seems like there's got to be legal issues associated, and they need to be identified clearly. That would go with any of the options. I just raised that. It seems as though inherent in this whole discussion, there's got to be some legal connections that we have to be aware of in terms of the authority. Can the state do this through law? I only am raising that. I have no idea.
I would love to have an airport that's making money. That'd be great. State-owned
Well,
airport.
yeah, an airport that makes money and looks for the future to grow with what the future of the state is and what air travel is. And it seems like all the airports around us are doing very, very well. And it seems like Burlington is doing very well, but we have a lot of people traveling further. And I think that's what really causes those other airports to do well. I want Plattsburgh to be successful, but it's like Old Home Week when I go over there. There's a lot of Vermont travelers there, and would love to see them right in Burlington, and other places as well. But yeah, very happy to see the way the discussion's going, and everybody kind of at least nodding their head in the right direction, that we might be on the right path to looking at some very positive things to go on in Northern Vermont. It's not only a Northern Vermont, but it truly is a regional, and I mean, it's really a New England airport at this point in time, when we look to pull in other people from the surrounding areas to come to Vermont versus everybody going elsewhere to fly.
Anyone have any comments on how this committee should be made up? I mean,
That would be the study, I guess.
yeah, what would be the study? Who would be on this study committee? What have we thought about this, Senator?
Well, we had a couple of suggestions about who should to be added. I think, was it Charlie made a comment about additional, maybe not voting, but whose expertise is really important to be at the table.
But who would appoint these folks?
So I think I'm going to say something that Councilor Emery raised her hand to also offer that I've heard from Councilor Emery and Helen, but I will echo that and tell me if I get it wrong at all, Megan. Charlie Baker, I like his idea of having a non-voting seat just so that he can follow the discussion as well as the airport director. The other topic that was specifically raised by Helen really, and I believe Councilor Emery would support it too, is to have a seat for the general aviation community. And I would propose that Charlie Baker in the CCRPC as serving the region might be the one to figure out who that is, just like he's going to figure out who outside of Burlington, Williston, and Winooski in the current language. Their organization is charged with finding that.
But we're talking here, if we have a language, and probably in the T-bill, who we would specify would have to be at the table for this work.
How would that be made up?
Yeah.
Yes, you have any
In
comments?
addition to the ones that are already identified.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, go right ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I raised one of the names specifically in my testimony. Like I said, I met with more than a dozen people, but Doug Smith would be an asset to this study. And if he is unable to serve, although I would think he would be willing to serve.
What's his position? We don't
I
normally.
knew a Doug Smith that works for GMP,
GMP,
but
okay.
I don't know, there's probably a lot of Doug Smiths out
No, he's the founder of the Vermont Flight Academy. He is respected through and through by the entire aviation community at that airport. Everyone at that airport knows who Doug Smith is. He built the Vermont Flight Academy up from the ground, and he turned it into a world-class institution, really, that has not only an associate's degree, but a Bachelor of Science degree. This is something that really sets the VFA apart. And he, I really encourage you to, and I'm happy to give you contact information. Helen knows him personally as well, too.
It's a great
My
opportunity
position,
for
not
us.
me.
I think we ought to be careful how we put this together. We want one bite at this apple and we want to make it right. So that's my concern. We want to do this properly. I think we have the opportunity to do it. I think we have the expertise to do it, but I want to make sure it's done right. Yes.
So Michelle Boomhauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. In the testimony,
Yeah.
in the testimony that was provided, there was one suggested contemplation by Brian, I believe, about the state having a potential role in airport governance. And I guess my reaction to that, this is not the official administration's position, would be that that might complicate things more, because the legislature would then effectively be engaged with airport operations and policy.
Could be the problem on steroids, right? Oh, we can fix that. We'll even make it worse.
Not that legislators don't have good ideas.
Well, this committee.
And already overseeing 10 state airports, I sort of appreciate the complexity of these matters. So that being said, I don't necessarily think that, as was pointed out by Brian, if there is a preponderance of V-trans having to be analyzed in the context of this, then it would be difficult for V-trans to be the oversight, of the consultants and the process. So setting that aside, I think that the number of topics and issues that need to be addressed in this study, it's probably going to take a request for information to develop a scope whereby a consultant is secured to sort of interview key entities, persons, to determine like what all needs to be included in this study. And then once we have an RFI with a scope developed, then we would go out to an RFP, request for proposals, to secure a consultant with qualifications to undertake this. And I had originally mentioned to Senator Chittenden that perhaps we have consultants on retainer, but the more I think about it, the more I recognize that any consultants on retainer that we have with aviation expertise probably have or are currently working with the airport, so that wouldn't be an appropriate direction to take. So in terms of the scale of time, I imagine this would be a 12-month endeavor, at least 3 months working on the 3 to 4, working on the preparatory process and getting the consultant contracted, and then 9 to maybe 12 months for the engagement with the parties relative to the process, because this is not a complex, this is a complex discussion that will have to occur. So with those frames in mind, I'm thinking that the cost for something like this is probably going to be somewhere between 75 and 125,000 is just like off the top of my head. I think through the RFI process, we can hone in on what that might actually be. In terms of where you would find such money, the federal resources that we have access to could not pay for this type of study. Each year, there's $500,000 placed in the Burlington International Airport budget line item in our program to help assist with match for federal grants the airport receives. And I don't know, I'd have to consult with airport staff to better understand the flexibility in terms of commitments they may already have for the match money coming up in FY23. But I would suggest that could be a source. I think our transportation fund dollars are very constricted at this point and will be into the future. And so the agency would not support using transportation fund dollars for this purpose necessarily.
Yes. Okay.
So just thank you very much. Going back to, thank you, Councilor Army, for suggesting an individual. I think what might be more useful for now is just to look at the bill language, and maybe we do this at a subsequent date, and just think about who will choose, for example, Doug Smith, if that's the individual that applies. And so maybe we'll come back to that in a later discussion.
So we would do it by criteria appointed by, so.
Absolutely.
That's how we do it.
It's just a thought of how.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, you almost want to have people that don't have a vested interest.
Oh, no.
In it, that have an objective interest. And, yeah, as you said, Chair, we have one chance, we have one bite at the apple.
Let's do it right.
Let's do it right.
Well, I want to thank everybody this morning for coming. It was very, very informative. It's something we needed, something we've been thinking about for some time. And with all your information and expertise, it was very, very helpful. I think we're making progress. And again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time this morning to come and visit. Brian, you back home yet, or are you still in Florida?
I'm about 2 weeks from being back in Vermont.
Okay, I need your business to say, so
I
hurry up.
know you do. I know you're hurting.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks again.
Yeah,
Good
bye,
seeing you.
Ellen.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks. All right,
Copy real quick.
we're on schedule.
We just run down.
Sure, go ahead.
Be right back.
Taking a break?
We might as well right now. Let's take a break right now.
Instead of 10:45.
Yeah, it's at 10:45. Yeah. Let's do it.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have a question for you.
You want me?
It's an easy one.
Oh,
Senator Mazza,
Yes.
I can do these.
you want me to go offline?